Thanks, Cassandra. And before I start my slides, just make note that, yeah, the dark green area is the area that I'll be talking about, which is very much adjacent to the neighborhoods that Cassandra has been studying. And most of the area is across the border from Fulton County and Atlanta city limits into unincorporated DeKalb County. So with that, I'll share my screen. And start off by introducing myself. As Annie mentioned, I started out as an oceanographer, and then actually I was a soil microbiology ecologist. So I have a habitat orientation. I was a sustainability professional at the University of California and an outdoors enthusiast. But I've been learning a lot that as much as I've known about science and nature over the years, I still have a narrow lens to learn about green space protection and sustainable neighborhoods. So I'm grateful to share it today, and thank you, Annie, for the invitation, and Cassandra to work with me on this presentation. And I also hope to learn a lot and get some great feedback from this audience. This is really great to have folks from around the country looking on. So from my perspective as a hiker and a trip leader I noticed that there's lots of hiking areas around Atlanta centered in these big green circles with about a 10-minute driving radius. But just south of Atlanta in our study area, as Cassandra says, there's a gap of large green spaces of several hundred acres with more than a few miles of trails. And there's really nothing in South Atlanta. And so for me, I was wondering about that, what could be done about that? And also I was seeing that green space was under threat. There's the gap that I just described, and some land grabs by commercial enterprises of existing parcels and developing them. As Cassandra mentioned, there's several landfills in this area that have been capped and are just idle. And then there are public green spaces that are where there's no public access. So that's somewhat changing, but we want to create a network of public spaces that are both preserving habitat and provide outdoor exploration opportunities. And there are several correctional facilities as well. So these are the things that kind of tipped me off that green space might be needed. And also I want to acknowledge my collaborators, primarily Joe Peary, who's the other volunteer co-manager with myself for our group of volunteers, and then Margaret Spalding, who's the executive director of the South River Watershed Alliance. The South River Watershed Alliance is a 501c3 nonprofit that's been around for about 20 years. And the South River Forest Coalition, on the other hand, is an unincorporated group of volunteers that's been around for about 3 years, and I'll describe it more in detail. So as Cassandra mentioned, we wanted to take the concept of not just green space, but bringing the ideas to community action. And we've really identified, as we've been looking into this issue, that there's a lot of history of social and environmental injustice in Southeast Atlanta with the landfills. There's a wastewater treatment plant nearby, industrial parks, failing schools, crime, correctional facilities, and crumbling housing. And through all that, with the theme that goes along with the transiency index that Cassandra mentioned, is that we have had a hard time really finding out what are the preferences of many longtime residents as well as transient residents or newcomers to these neighborhoods. What do they want? So we're looking, I want to continue again with the social issues surrounding the South River Forest, and so that we can link to many audiences and the leadership in those neighborhoods and groups. And a lot of this slides that I'm about to show you is we're the beneficiaries of a pro bono urban planning process that was supported by the company Perkins and Will. And that was a year-long study that was tremendously helpful. So we're linking this also to health issues. As you look at Atlanta, where the yellow star is, and Obesity is a much higher prevalence in South Atlanta than the north side of town. The same thing with asthma. And our study area is in the dark green border with a 10-minute drive radius in white. Also, activity levels seem to be lower in South Atlanta than North Atlanta by this inactivity crude prevalence. Poverty index seems to be higher in South Atlanta as well as somewhat downtown and around our study area as well. And health insurance coverage is a pretty good index of how vulnerable people are and perhaps how stressed they might be. So that's also higher, lower coverage in South Atlanta than North Atlanta. So now I want to switch gears to the conservation efforts that have been going on relative to the surrounding areas of Atlanta. And here's the watershed map again of the South River leading down to Jackson Lake in the lower right. And this really does drain downtown Atlanta as well as many other parts of, I think, 6 or 7 counties. And the South River Watershed Alliance, which is our fiscal sponsor, has been working for over 20 years to restore the river to benefit nature and people. So the watershed protection has also really been around upgrading the sewer system and bringing in compliance with the Clean Water Act. And that's, you know, a $1 billion project, which is takes a lot of struggle, a lot of hard work by civic utility engineers and a lot of fundraising. I put in, I still have the question marks in there for 2005 or so was when the West Atlanta Watershed Alliance was formed. And they're a nonprofit that also supports environmental justice around urban flooding and as well as water quality for the upper South River. And the flooding activism is continuing also now with a new group called the Entrenchment Creek Community Stewardship Council, which was founded about 3 years ago. So there's been clean water activism for over 20, 30 years. And there's a lot of environmental justice implications for the all of the developments that we've been talking about in terms of social indicators and land use planning or lack of planning throughout many decades in South Atlanta. And people are now speaking up about restoring environmental justice and bringing investment to this neighborhood. Really, we talk about that there's been disinvestment for decades, and now it's time to bring positive investment back. As far as the land preservation, in 2014, there's a large parcel within on the east side of the border in DeKalb County called the old Atlanta Prison Farm, which was about 300 acres and cut off from public access, but a large regenerating dairy farm that was a prison farm at one time. And we've been trying to save it since about 2014. And then also we've been trying to protect another park from being swapped for a movie studio development. So talk more about that in a minute. Southeast Metro Atlanta, why is it important to the civic leaders? Well, DeKalb County has designated the Greenspace and South River Forest as extremely important. The city of Atlanta and the Nature Conservancy have said the area holds significant ecological value for the river and the entire region. And it's also a place that needs inclusive planning for equitable, sustainable growth as Atlanta grows. And of course, like many cities, Atlanta has been sprawling for decades. And this is certainly within the sprawl perimeter of the city. And this is an opportunity to preserve some habitat and green space within the perimeter of the boundary interstate. So the city design in 2017 was approved unanimously by City Council to protect this area, sort of the green blob in the lower right, and calling it the South River Park. And then, so a little bit about myself, and then how have our volunteers come into being active for preservation of green space in South Atlanta. want to talk about that? Well, some of it is this land grab, and this is about 10 minutes south of my home right now where I'm speaking. And on the blue area on the top right or top left is the prison farm, and it's at risk, and it's actually has been proposed as a public safety training center, taking up about 100 acres of that, and that's a 100-year project with 100 million or 50-year project with $100 million cost, and almost no public input. The red areas have been purchased up by the movie studio and have proposed a big swap in the hatched area right in the center top of the screen. The movie studio has also purchased about 170 acres right on the South River and are proposing a massive development there with, and they haven't been able to get flood control approval yet. There's many parcels that are being developed, and because this is an unincorporated part of the county, the amount of public planning, especially for private parcels, is very limited. And so we're hoping that we can have a much more integrated planning process, thinking 20 to 50 years out. So the coalition really was started in about 2018 when several volunteers just became frustrated and tired of all of these impulsive land deals and wanted to create a group that was speaking up for Greenspace protection. So here's a list of many of our volunteers, which on the left, it's about 20 or 30 folks. And demographically, a lot of us are white and professionals. While there's also many people here that are African American and have been in these neighborhoods for decades as well. So, but there is a gap that we've identified in our outreach and connection with the legacy neighborhoods, and we're trying to develop that as well. So that's kind of the theme between Cassandra's and my presentation, is that there is a gap in our stakeholders, and we're trying to build that. So among our volunteers, we do have quite an array of subject matter expertise, and given our planning backgrounds, our primary efforts have been to reach out to elected officials and get them to reconsider some of the votes that they've made, or to bring in third-party review of some of the plans that have been advanced by private foundations and haven't even been made public yet. And then some of the organizations are listed on the lower right. And again, the South River Watershed Alliance has been instrumental in shepherding this, along with the Nature Conservancy, has been really very fundamental in providing us with professional advice and overview, and bringing in additional stakeholders in a professional process. So in detail, here is the area that we're talking about, and we've identified, in this case, about 15 natural areas that have significance. And you can see that it is a mix of green space and light industrial and residential neighborhoods. And why would we want to call this a forest? Well, there are some significant green spaces available, including several landfills and former landfills, as well as recovering dairy farms, forests that are now mature forests. And it would be great to have a linked set of green spaces that these areas would be able to enjoy. So what management model might we consider to hold together this patchwork of green spaces and residential areas, as well as industrial areas with interstates going through it? Well, not too far away is the Arabia Mountain National Heritage Area, and it was created about 40 years ago, and is a mix of large green spaces and residential neighborhoods. And it is managed to a light degree by the Department of Interior, I believe. And so it does have some staffing and oversight. Our area would not be probably as managed as at the federal level, but more at the regional level, with the county and city being involved. But we're still working on what that might be. We're just trying to create the vision at this point. So these are some of the logos of groups that we're working with. And we do want to bring in additional stakeholders and reach out more to these neighborhoods. And there are civic leaders within these neighborhoods that are putting on events such as the health fair at the bottom that Cassandra and I attended in the Thomasville Heights area. And when we reached out to folks at our table, we had great reception of people had a really high priority for nature and really wanted to have more of it and to have it more accessible. So that was a great event to share there. And then also we're finding that local pre-K schools have a deep network of parents that are really concerned about nature and are bringing their children out in activities into the woods and marveling at things growing and legacy oak trees that are out there that are pretty majestic and have a great story to tell. We haven't done that well with K-12 outreach yet. There is, lots of interest as well, but we just are short on bandwidth. I guess that's in terms of our group of volunteers, what's missing is time. We have a lot of skills and knowledge, but we're all busy folks and we don't have that much time. And also we do have among our volunteers representatives from many of the major universities in the area, Georgia State, Georgia Tech, UGA, and Emory as well. And we would love to have more involvement with some of the classes, and actually an urban planning group of graduate students from Georgia Tech has been paying attention to our project as well. But I think there's a great opportunity to be involved with university classes and urban planning and engineering and nature and civics groups as well for K-12. So we're really trying to, preserve green space for the next generations. And our challenge isn't so much to teach children about the natural world, but find ways to sustain the instinctive connections they already carry. And this is a great reminder for me of why I'm trying to save green space. And I look forward to more ideas from the audience here. So we went through a process with the Nature Conservancy, or we did, and created 4 principles of vision to protect the South River on the upper left and its headwaters, to create green space and tree canopy. In purple is to preserve environmental justice and reverse that, and then also to have equity and income mobility, which is that is where investment in these neighborhoods would happen. So primarily our group has been in reactive mode, stopping impulsive deals like the county land swap of 40 acres. That's on public land. And then also this public safety training campus, which was a $100 million project proposed for 240 acres at $10 a year for 50 years with virtually no public input. And we've been trying to reverse that. It was approved by City Council, but we're hoping that it will it has already been reduced greatly in size, but we're still trying to get more public input onto that. And then, of course, private development is very much a concern of ours and hard to intervene. And we would love to have a developer's playbook that should a developer come into some of these areas, that we would like them to, really be thoughtful about getting community input, protecting the watershed, and providing public access to trails and green space if possible. So in proactive mode, we want grown-up planning for the next 50 years to define the area and tracts of lands with potential for recreation and habitat, to connect to the watershed, to understand which management models might be appropriate for whether it's their parks or green space or natural habitat. And then linking to related issues around sustainable communities and quality of life, such as health and housing. And we're working on our messaging still around environmental justice, climate protection as carbon reservoirs, sustainable communities, investment, and progress. So here's my wish list as one of the co-organizers is I wish I had more time to network and reaching out to neighborhoods. I would love to have a volunteer coordinator with a lot of time. I want to create an emissaries network that will reach out to various constituencies and neighborhoods and civic leaders, and to have that developer's playbook. So with that, can wrap it up, and we can take questions, suggestions, or concerns. And folks have Greenspace models that they think are appropriate at this scale for regional urban green space, mixed community, developer's playbook. And then also when we share these slides, we have a lot of links and resources in slides below this one. So that's it.